Welcome to the 7th episode of our Outlier Ventures series covering topics related to token design. A quick disclaimer before we start. Outlier Ventures are our hold tokens mentioned on this show, but nothing said here constitutes financial advice, so please do your own research before making any investment decision. And today I'd like to welcome Cassidy Daly of Centrifuge, which is a protocol that bridges assets like invoices, real estate, and royalties to DeFi, thanks to which borrowers can finance their real-world assets without banks or other intermediaries. So welcome, Cassidy. Very good to have you here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So to kick off, can you please tell us about your background and how you ended up at Centrifuge?
Oh, that's a big one. I've done quite a lot of things, I guess, and somehow ended up in crypto as many people do. So I actually studied economics and international finance. I had an internship at the Federal Reserve, actually, when I was first really diving into crypto, what it means, what it can be used for, and I guess I caught the bug and decided to move to Berlin and try to start my own project in the crypto space. That didn't end up working out, but in that journey I met Centrifuge and got really excited about this project. And so I just started diving in on the Centrifuge token design, and here we are.
Really cool, especially the Fed internship. So it makes me a bit wary. How would you describe Centrifuge? What is it?
Well, I think you did a pretty good job introducing it. So we really think of it as a platform for decentralized asset financing. So really connecting on both sides of that, the borrowers that are looking for financing for their assets and investors on the other side that can actually give the capital to finance those assets. So anything from invoices, real estate, music royalties, we bridge these assets to liquidity, both in traditional finance or TradFi or DeFi as well. And I think the key here is really what you mentioned as well, which is that this is without banks or intermediaries in the process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the core use case is tokenization of real-world assets that I can then take and use, I presume, as collateral in most cases, especially now, given where DeFi is at to borrow against.
Right, so that's exactly how it works with our integration with MakerDAO. So Tin Lake, the dApp that we have on Centrifuge, tokenizes these assets. And actually, in order to integrate with MakerDAO, it mints ERC20 tokens that represent a share of this pool. MakerDAO is actually getting the senior tranche of these shares. Those ERC20 tokens are locked into MakerDAO as collateral, and then DAI is drawn down to finance those assets.
Very interesting, very cool. And currently, what's the total value locked in Centrifuge? In other words, what's the total value of assets that you guys you've already tokenized?
So we're pretty excited about it. Today we have over 18 million in total value locked. I think compared to other DeFi projects, it doesn't sound like quite a lot. But we're pretty excited mostly because these are real assets that exist in the world today and not just crypto native. And I think it's pretty groundbreaking from that perspective.
Very cool, very cool. And obviously, you guys also have a native token, the CFG token.
Yes.
And can we kind of zoom in on that a bit more? So what would you say are the core problems that the token is or will be or should be solving?
So our token lives on our Centrifuge chain. So Centrifuge chain, maybe I'll just do a brief overview of that. So it's built on Substrate, and it really provides the foundation for using Centrifuge. This is where documents are anchored, tokens are minted to represent these assets. And then Tin Lake, the dApp, we will be moving from Ethereum over to Centrifuge chain for it to live. And really the use case here is to optimize specifically for the transactions that Centrifuge requires. And it allows our architecture to be improved upon how it exists today on Ethereum in a few key ways, I guess, really speed and cost, but also storage efficiencies, as well as the privacy that our users will need going forward. So this Centrifuge token, or CFG, really provides the framework to run this without relying on a single point of failure, so namely Centrifuge, like our team or the company. So the token allows token holders to do that without us helping them, as well as to provide a way to accelerate the utility of the network.
Yeah, that makes sense. And who are the different stakeholders in the kind of the centrifuge ecosystem? And yeah, maybe we can kind of like go directly to the other part of the question. And how is value exchanged among them?
So I would say at the moment on Centrifuge chain, the main stakeholders there would be the nominators and the validators. So the validators that are staking their own value, getting an active validator slot to actually produce and confirm blocks, and then the nominators that are selecting them. As well, the Tin Lake dApp, as we move it over to Centrifuge chain, these are, I would say, our core users and our core use case at the moment. So these are both the borrowers on the one side and the investors on the other. And then a key piece of the puzzle that we will be adding as a stakeholder more directly in the future are underwriters. So those are the parties that are really assessing the risk of these different pools and setting the interest rates as well.
Makes sense, yes. And could you please walk me through an example of how you actually tokenize a real world asset and then borrow against it? Like, what's the process behind that? I think that would be really interesting since you guys are kind of like the pioneers in this field.
Yeah. So we really start with a document that's representing the asset. So, for example, an invoice that you want to get financed, that document is anchored on Centrifuge chain. So a hash of the document is stored as an anchor, and then any party would be able to see the validity of that document. With that anchor, we mint an NFT if the borrower decides that they want to get financing for that specific asset. So that NFT is then locked in our Tin Lake dApp. Each pool on Tin Lake has a very specific type of asset that it is accepting. So the asset would need to be in that specific range, for example, of risk and interest rate and type of asset. That asset is locked, and investors on the other side will see that there are assets that have been originated, is what we call them, on the Tin Lake dApp, and they can lock in DAI either themselves. So this could be, for example, any individual that goes through the KYC that's needed to invest in these assets, or through our integration with MakerDAO, we can draw DAI directly from Maker, which was pretty exciting. And then that DAI, regardless of where it's coming from, is then given to the user, and they can use some sort of off-ramp if they need to, or just use that DAI.
Okay, interesting. So for example, well, it kind of it makes a lot of sense makes sense, but it's easy to understand when it comes to the kind of the money markers like Compound and Aave. But then when we talk about Maker, so if I lock in an NFT that's a virtual representation of my real world asset into Maker, and then I default on my loan, who gets to keep the NFT or the real world asset? Is it the protocol itself, or and then the protocol has to sell the NFT to kind of cover my default, or how does that work?
So that's a great question. I definitely glossed way over the legal framework that we've worked very hard underneath all of this. So how we set it up on sort of the back end, I guess. We work with asset originators primarily instead of directly with the borrowers. And by asset originator, we mean any sort of consumer-facing company that's actually gathering all of these assets. So, for example, Paperchain is one of them. They interface directly with the artists who are getting the royalty payments from Spotify. So then Paperchain would bring these assets into a Tin Lake pool. And legally, how they do this is we set up an SPV with the asset originator. And they are basically creating that legal framework that they are responsible in case an asset were to default, right? So this is one of the first backstops in the system in terms of the risk. So there is a legal structure that's set up that's taking the underlying risk for these assets if they were to default. The next piece is that once these assets are pooled together, we actually separate them into two different tranches. So a senior tranche and a junior tranche. And at the moment, it's primarily the senior tranche that investors are investing in, and that includes MakerDAO or potentially an Aave in the future. And the junior tranche is primarily this asset originator themselves that's participating. Centrifuge as well takes a piece of this junior tranche to show that we also have skin in the game, and both of us would be the first to lose if an asset were to default. So there is a cushion of risk, so to say, here for anyone who's participating in that senior piece. So a good number of assets could default before the senior investors get affected. And that varies from pool to pool, and that's something that if someone were to look at our Tin Lake DApp, you can see that really clearly what those numbers are for each individual pool, and it tends to vary basically based on the type of risk of the asset.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, that makes it much clearer. Thank you. Yeah, and tying all this back to the CFG token, we talked about all the kind of the value that's being kind of created by your protocol. How does the CFG token capture this value? Apart from, I presume, governance mechanisms that can be, that you can use to kind of control what's happening on the underlying protocol. If maybe there is nothing else, but perhaps you guys have thought of other things that you can add there. I'm just curious.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, I mean, governance is a huge piece for many DeFi projects and for us as well. But we are a little bit different in the sense that we do have our own chain. So the token is definitely used for the chain security, which is an important piece of its value. And it's also used right now for the transaction fees. So not only is that, the transaction fees on chain for having an anchor on chain or minting an NFT, but it's also for some of the financing fees that will be happening on our Tin Lake DApp once we move that over to Centrifuge chain. So that is a huge piece of the value accrual potentially in this token, is being able to actually have the token represent the real utility that the network is providing. So the actual fee that you're paying to finance these assets. There are a couple of other use cases that we're excited about potentially in the future, but I won't go into those today.
That makes sense. Okay, so basically you're saying that the more the protocol is used, the more demand there will be for the CFG token, because you'll need the CFG token to pay for the services provided by the protocol.
Right. So that is a huge part of why any crypto asset is valuable on a layer one chain. You're actually using that token to pay for gas on Ethereum, for example. And I think this is a huge part that a lot of people sometimes miss, is that the actual consumption with this token, so the actual spending of it, is super important when it comes to its value moving through the system. I think one of the things that does come up, though, is if there's only a really high velocity of this token, it does have an impact on the value as well. And so there need to be mechanisms to sort of slow that velocity down, have a reason for people to save the token, let's say. This is generally in crypto protocols done by staking it for various reasons. So at the moment, there is a large percentage of the Centrifuge token that's staked for validators, so for the chain security. But in the future, we also hope to add a couple of more ways that users would be able to do this.
Yeah, can't wait. Can't wait to discuss that in later episodes.
Yeah.
Okay, and to kind of move on to governance and how you guys approach governance. Yeah, I just like to kind of pick your brain on that. Are you kind of like fans of progressive decentralization? You know, you keeping the majority of decision-making power for yourself early on, and then gradually kind of move it to being more decentralized, or do you think the community should have a say? Early on? What's your view there?
I guess based on our actions so far, it has been a progressive decentralization, but we've been live for a little bit over a year now, and we're really excited to start having more and more community participation. I think the key for us here was specifically our token distribution in the very beginning, and really getting the token into the hands of real users. So we didn't do an ICO. We had private sales of the tokens originally, and the primary way that we got the token out to users was by getting different teams to run validators and just be able to spin them up themselves and start earning the token, as well as a reward for all of the users of our Tinlake DApp. So our Tinlake DApp has given out, I believe, more than 5 million CFG as rewards for users. And now the block reward has given out just about 12 million, maybe give or take a couple of million there based on where we're at in the year. But those tokens are now held by real users that provided actual value to this network. And as a result, they have a vested interest in the health of the network long term. And so we're really excited to have hopefully our first on-chain vote now for how we're going to be changing the rewards for our Tinlake users in the next couple of weeks here. And so it's kind of our first step into really giving that over to the community in a real way. And I would say by default, even though crypto protocols will have governance with the token and have a lot of users participating, there is still a lot of faith in the team that has developed it. So even if it's not a de facto control with the token itself, it's still sort of a soft power that our team has. And so we know that, and we know that we can be influential, but I think it's really important that users still have the tools to disagree and choose something else if they were to see that something else would be better for the network.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. All right, we are almost out of time, so I think a good way to wrap up would be to kind of ask you if people want to find out more about Centrifuge and perhaps become part of your community, what's the best way to do it?
I think if you want to learn more, our website's a great resource, just centrifuge.io. And if you want to participate in our Tinlake DApp, you can find that at tinlake.centrifuge.io, and you can find out how to become an asset originator or an investor in Tinlake pools. I would say if you are super advanced, then maybe you might be interested in becoming a validator and spinning one up, and you could reach out to us either by email or on Telegram. We're always available. That's just t.me/centrifuge_chat for that. and happy to chat with anyone who's interested in any of those things as well.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Cassidy, for coming in. And yeah, we hope to have you here again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Outlier Ventures has been investing in accelerating the Web3 ecosystem since 2013. In 2019, we launched Basecamp, an accelerator program for pre-seed startups operating in DeFi, NFTs, and open data. We'll provide you with capital, help you with your token design, give you access to our network of the best investors and founders in Web3, as well as back office support and mentorship. If you're a Web3 founder, be sure to check it out. The applications are now open.